Good morning, everybody. Welcome. My name is Trent Rosenthal, and I am the founder and CEO of Bespoke Training. We're very excited to have you joining today's insightful discussion on building a future-ready team with our panel guests, Tim and Hannah from Versent. Before we start, I just wanted to quickly talk about a little bit of housekeeping. You'll see that we are recording the session, so we've purposely muted your microphones and also, from a privacy point of view, turned your cameras off. We are encouraging engagement with this session, so we would like to ensure that if you have any questions during the session, please send them through the chat window. We've got a facilitator, Fiona, who's on the call that will be helping us with the questions. And at the end of the panel session, we'll hopefully address some of those questions and challenge Tim and Hannah with some of those questions that come through from the attendees. Now, before we introduce our guests, just a little bit of context of how we sort of got to this discussion and how we're presenting this content for you. Over the best part of 4.5 years, we've successfully worked with Versent through their learning and training and certification journey. Through a very structured approach, Bespoke's designed and deployed AWS learning and certification pathways to support Versent's huge growth in their technical delivery teams across the ANZ region. Now, with that engagement, we thought that there could be some really key learnings and takeaways that we potentially could share with the Bespoke community. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce you to the webinar and welcome Tim Hope, who's our Chief Technology Officer, and also Hannah Ryan, who's the Learning Experience Lead at Versent. Welcome, guys. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Trent.
Okay, so Tim, what I'd probably like to start with from a question to you is just so that our listeners understand entirely your background, if you can just give us a quick introduction to Versent and more specifically your role within the business.
Yeah, sure, Trent. So Versent's what I would call a cloud-native consulting company. So we're working in the industry, helping customers adopt cloud technology and then really getting the most out of it. So what we see is we need engineers with modern practices and the ability to work with enterprise customers to get that outcome. Often it is like, how do we migrate them to the cloud? And after that, the conversation really changes to how do we use cloud technology to start with their digital initiatives, start to drive data initiatives, and help to use cloud to really kind of deliver that business value out to them. I've been with Versent for 10 years, so from a startup to where it is today, a huge amount of growth in the time, along with kind of the trajectory we're seeing in the cloud business.
Yeah, awesome. Excellent. Now, Hannah, Learning Experience Lead. Could you sort of share, again, what your key role is at Versent?
Yeah, for sure. It's a bit of a funky title, but I joined Versent around 2 years ago as the Learning Experience Lead. And in a nutshell, what my role covers is supporting our people to get access to the learning experiences they need to develop and grow and deliver really great customer outcomes. So that covers things like working with our partners like Bespoke, but also running or enabling programs in-house as well, and the whole end-to-end kind of learning design process. So it's been really great. I've worked in learning for nearly 10 years now. The technology and the consulting space is a really exciting place to be working in.
Yeah, right. Thank you. So, Tim, if we're looking to dive a little bit deeper into how Versent goes about building a future-ready team, can you share with us sort of the approach about building skills and capabilities? You know, what is that sort of, I suppose, overarching strategy or vision that you and the senior leadership team lead?
Yeah, sure. So I'd probably say that we started as a startup, and when we were a small organization, it was really easy for skills development and to drive certification and training, because a lot of the conversations would be like in the office, or very easy for people to understand how to access it. As we grew, what we really noticed is the ability for people to know what to do or how to access skills, or even to understand what skills are around the enterprise, or what skills are needed on projects, started to really struggle. We started to put in programs around like certification. So we had a program called Certipalooza, really focused about how do we help people get Amazon certifications. And I think what that led to us is a mode of learning where it was all about how do I get certified, not about do I have the right skills, how do I support the customers. So I would say it wasn't really a learning environment, it was kind of a cert environment. So a couple of years ago, well, added to that was what we also saw is that our training budget wasn't actually being used. So we had a training budget towards the end of the year. We'd look at it and say, okay, quick, everyone go and do training in the last couple of months so we can use the training budget. We made a call as a leadership team, and as I started as the CTO office, is let's centralize that training budget and let's see how do we enable skills and learning inside the organization. What that led to is we were able to enact programs out and really kind of make things available, which helped our people adopt, know what was there, and helped us kind of scale. Critical component was around putting in an academy and Hannah coming on board. I think having a structured L&D approach was really important. So before that, it was kind of the people leaders. We didn't really have skills. We didn't really match capabilities. We didn't attach to like L&D frameworks in the market. So once Hannah came on, it gave us a really great like structural foundation. We had an academy, and I would say that's probably like status quo in the industry, having that capability. What we then kind of said to ourselves is learning, doing courses, like mentoring is kind of like the start. How do we really accelerate that? And so as a leadership team, we said, well, let's put together more enablement sessions. Let's start to run different types of activities that make it really available for people to join in. So kind of got around the problem where like when I was an engineer, I want to do a certification, but it'd always be, I'll do it next month. I'll do it next month. So putting some of these programs in place meant that the barrier to entry was such lower. It was all kind of set up. It was kind of like, well, why don't you join in this season? Then straight away you can kind of have the barriers removed. It's very easy to contribute. It's very easy to meet your learning goals. And I say as this journey, we've kind of settled on, we have a craft program, learning as a component of that, sharing skills as a component of that. We have certain seasons we run to focus different kind of human development skills around that. And then we couple that with different type of training mechanisms and understanding the skills and capability in the organization. I'd probably also say we've taken a huge amount of feedback from our teams. So what was really important for us is as we developed the programs and the capability was let's take feedback and let's learn and adapt. We didn't want to be saying, hey, here's the best way to do it. We want to say, we're going to give you some options. What works for you, we're going to then encourage. What doesn't work, we're kind of not going to encourage. So it was really quite an adaptive model. And I'd say over the last couple of years, Hannah, like we've seen a huge change in the program, but also much different participation and almost like a really great groundswell of learning within the organization.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, by default, we have some customers that say it's all about the capability. We need to have the capability in the business. So it sounds like that sort of explanation or description, Tim, is it's more than just capability. It's around building a culture of continuous learning. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, definitely around continuous learning and continually enabling people to take advantage of different learning styles that meet their needs. A junior engineer might need a very structured learning approach. A senior engineer may need a different style of approach. So how do you kind of make it adapt, and you adapt your learning programs and styles to the different types of people, the different learning that's appropriate to their role or their seniority.
Yeah, okay. Now, Hannah, Tim obviously referenced you coming into the business and your part in that role. Do you have anything else that you sort of think that you should add to the sort of that initial question around the approach to the building the skills and capabilities in the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think Tim alluded to the startup culture, and while some of that led to a lot of focus on certifications, we've still benefited a lot from those roots. And what I mean by that is that people are empowered to say, hey, I've got a really great idea, or I want to run some sessions on AI. And there's no barriers to our people coming together and initiating learning for the benefit of everyone. And it's actually something that's really encouraged. So I think we benefit a lot from our roots as a startup business where people are just kind of like roll up the sleeves, hands in, like happy to pick up and delve into different aspects of the business. So that to me is a huge benefit. The other thing that would be remiss of me not to call out is our exec team are phenomenal sponsors of learning. Like Tim leads the charge on this a heap, which is amazing and I think goes a really long way, but it extends to the broader executive team too. Like there's a lot of importance placed on learning and our craft, and it's kind of our differentiator in a way as a business. So our execs walk the walk as well. They'll either get involved in programs, they might mentor, they might, judge when it's a competition-based thing. So I think all of these factors coming together really contribute to a meaningful and positive learning culture.
Yeah, right. Interesting. Okay, thank you. So Tim, as you sort of lead the customer engagement and supporting your customers through that digital transformation, let's just talk about the technology challenges. Obviously, the technology, there's been some advancements over the last, 6 to 12 months. It's always reoccurring, but what do you see at the moment are some of the biggest technology challenges for your customer set, for F25 and beyond?
It's an interesting question. I could say AI, but I think really
The buzzword.
buzzword, I'll say the buzzword. It's interesting, like the rate of change in technology and the amount of different options are available as you kind of move customers into the cloud. And you've seen, I think AI is a really great example. We ran our Dev Jam last year, and AI was of interest. We ran it this year. We just finished it. The amount of AI that was just used into the day-to-day creation of the packs, into the narrative, you really saw a step change. I think if you kind of play this into businesses, this technology is moving so quickly. It's really hard for them to know, when should they jump into it? Is it the right time? Is it going to solve their problem? So there's a huge amount of technology, which is great because it commoditizes into the business. So things that weren't generally available are now generally available for all businesses. Now the question becomes is, how do they use that technology? Where do they apply it? And how do they make sure they're getting business value from it? I'd say coupled for that, it's very hard to go out to market and say, hey, I'd like a generative AI expert. So how do they get the right skills in their team? How do they talk to their employees and say, look, we're going to go on a transformational journey. It's going to be new technology. We're going to bring you along with that journey. It's not hey, we're going to go and rehire skills. It's how do you bring your workforce along, or your teams along with that change in technology, and then how do you give them a great guidance around making the right decisions. So I'd say there's lots of changes in the technology, but it's the amount of technology. It's that kind of unconstrained environment that businesses well, where should I invest? How should I do it? What's the right choice? What's the right choice for us strategically? And then how do I train and enable my people? And very quickly after that, it's becomes a process conversation. So, introduce technology, I've trained my people, then my processes start to suffer, and you kind of go around the cycle again.
Yeah, okay. So that from what I'm taking from that is that, in our space, you hear a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise. I mentioned the word buzzword around AI. So your customers are turning to you as the specialist to say, okay, let's simplify the problem that we're trying to solve within your business, and let's implement the right outcomes or the right technologies that are going to support the outcomes. So then that obviously means that you are continually having to keep on the forefront of the tech stack, the updates, and wading through the noise, shall we say. Okay, so Hannah, if we turn our attention back to sort of your role and specifically the learning outcomes at Versent, no doubt you've seen some changes even in the business of being in the business for a couple of years, and the different learning environments. Can you just sort of give us some insights around what you've experienced from day one to now, and also what you're hearing? Because I think Tim had mentioned that you provide your teams provide feedback and give you some context around their learning journey. So would you like to sort of elaborate a bit further on that?
Yeah, I think I'll even go back to a little bit before I joined Versent. I almost don't want to utter the C word of COVID, but that really produced a very interesting shift in the way that learning is designed and delivered and approached. And it's rare now to be able to get a whole group of people in a room together for a dedicated training session. And it's just not how people work anymore and how people want to work. Hybrid's the new normal. People want to have the flexibility to join into learning where and when it suits them. So I think we've seen sort of the shift to purely digital, and that was out of necessity. And we didn't necessarily have all the engagement tactics and things like that we know now. We kind of just responded with what was happening in the world at the time. And now what we're starting to see is, I think there's a desire for cohort-based learning, and that becomes really quite important, but we need to do it in a digital-friendly way. So the COVID flip was out of necessity, but people still crave connection and people still want to learn with others, or want the opportunity to say, hey, that's a great learning experience for me and my needs right now. I can go along and learn with someone else. So I think from a learning experience trends point of view, being able to create communities of learning, social learning in a digital way has become really, really important. And I think at Versent, what I've observed over, my two years here is that there's not one set way that people like to learn. So you really have to have different modalities available and consider the different environments that people are in. Coupled with that, we're in a consulting environment as well. So people's time that they can dedicate to learning ebbs and flows. So it's an interesting challenge, but it challenges learning practitioners to be better at their jobs, I would say, and really understand their learners and what they want and need, and craft and cultivate an environment that will help people to learn from others or actually and have access to learning sort of on demand and self-paced as well. So it's been a good reset, and the best learning practitioners will, as Tim said, listen to their people and get that feedback and continue to iterate and adapt as you go to meet the changing needs.
Yeah, okay. So you touched on learning modalities. Are you sort of open to sharing sort of the different learning modalities that Versent provide their teams with?
Yeah, definitely. I think you can't get away with not having clear self-paced learning available to people. And like I said, in a consulting environment, it's not like you can gather people at the same time every time to learn something. So whether that's curated learning or pathways for a particular capability or skill, we tend to have that available in Versent Academy, our learning experience platform. So that's self-service, access on demand. That's important to have as a baseline. But then I think instructor-led training still has a very critical place in our learning ecosystem and our learning landscape, and it's what our people really want and benefit from too. So whether that's partnering with Bespoke, which our people absolutely value, that interactive, having a dedicated instructor, being able to ask questions in the moment, being able to hear other people ask questions, that all goes a really long way to helping build your understanding and building your knowledge. So that's quite important. But then you also need to have hands-on experience and application as well. So if we think about the Bespoke offering, having access to labs to go into a risk-free environment, test things out, apply what you've learned to solve a real problem, that's really important. And then our Craft 180 programs, DevGem, for example, is coming up with a solution, building a prototype, pitching it. Like, it's all very heavily experience-based. So all these things together, I think, create a great learning experience and ecosystem. You almost can't get away with not having any of them. They work in harmony and they service different learning needs.
Yeah, okay. So that sort of one shoe does not fit all. So the sort of blended opportunity around self-paced, we like to call the self-paced component the bite-sized chunks. And do you, as an organization, assign or allocate learning time, like in a dedicated week?
Yeah, well, it's a very tricky and topical question, because what does a typical week look like for people? Like, there again is no one size fits all. So our approach is to make it clear how to get learning time. How do you have a conversation and block out some time when it suits you? When you're right in delivery mode for a really critical engagement, that's probably not going to be the best time, and you might skip over time that you had allocated. We don't want to force that and create stress or concern for people, but equally we want to make it easier for people to say, hey, in a month's time, I'd love to go on a bespoke course, or I'd love to go to some leadership training. Have the conversation and then make it easy to book that in and block that out. So again, not one shoe fits all there.
Yeah, okay. And from a planning point of view, like, do you follow so your team, do you follow a structured planning method that's a set time of the year, and like sort of how do you budget? Like, how does the Versent team plan engagement for learning across a 12-month period?
Yeah, I think there's an element of planned and unplanned, right? Like, you always want to still be adaptable to needs as they come up. So if you're too wedded to plan, this is what we're doing for the year, that's it, you don't leave yourself much wiggle room. But we kind of work sort of on a half yearly basis. So that'll be looking at, okay, what does our budget look like for training this year? Where are our critical areas where we need to see capability development, and what kind of programs are going to support that? What certifications are we wanting to see people attain, and how do we want to support people to do that and to prepare for that? What kinds of people have moved into a leadership position and now need leadership training? How many cohorts do we need of that? So I'd say on like a half yearly basis, and doing that also helps us to align to like performance cycles as well. So we can get some insight into the types of development activities and development goals people are setting, and then factor that into our planning as well. So I'd say it's around about a kind of half yearly type activity. I think with our Craft 180 program, we have 4 seasons that are kind of year round. So those tend to be locked in the timeframes that we are running that. But we then need to be like, okay, what's the theme of this year's Dev Jam? What certs are we chasing for Mega Certipalooza? Like, there still is the planning that needs to come with that too. So about half yearly we work together, and then always leaving room for the things that pop up, the new products that come about, the capabilities that we want to build. Yeah, so planned and unplanned.
Okay, so when the business is so strategically aligned of building that sort of continuous learning environment and culture, how do you track and monitor it? Like, what do you use as a accountability or metrics? Like, what is that measurement to ensure that you're on track? How do you track it?
Yeah, I really like the question around measurement, because I think I'm a bit of a stickler for it when we have a learning program being spoken about or thought about. Ultimately, like, the outcomes or the metrics that you're going to use and track will probably be customized to each learning solution. And they should be. With each learning experience or solution, you're looking to solve a problem, plug a gap, build some skills. So whatever metric you're going to use is going to be customized to that. But there's a lot of other key kind of indicators that we can lean on and use that help ultimately describe the success of a learning initiative. So that could be things like our engagement survey. That is a key indicator in terms of like how true our learning culture is and how much that is resonating with people. So that comes into it for sure. But there might be very tangible and specific things as well. Our certification drives might have, okay, we want to hit X number, or we want to beat the number of certifications we got last year. That's very tangible as well. I think my words of advice for people sort of like initiating a program is consider what the outcome is that you're seeking right from the start. Get very clear on that, get sign off and agreement on that from your sponsors, from whoever's backing the program or endorsing the program. And then make sure you identify the metrics that you're going to use to get that. So that could be existing things that you have access to. Certification numbers is pretty straightforward. or it might be more complicated, and you might want to measure capability or skill development over a 6-month period and things like that. So it's always going to differ by program, but it should always be done, and it should always be done from the design stage of any learning experience.
Yeah, I think that the accountability for us and the customers that we work with is those that are invested strategically with the big continuous learning culture, that hierarchy, sort of senior leadership driving that culture. The number one measurement is the accountability. It's an investment in time, it's an investment of resources, it's an investment in a budget. So Tim, I see you sitting there, nodding your head around while Hannah's speaking around certifications. I know that a bulk of our work has been around the AWS path. We've done some Microsoft Azure training with the team as well. But from a certification point of view, you've got some pretty impressive AWS certs and acknowledgements. Are you happy to share sort of with the audience sort of that number and how you continually raise the bar?
Sure. I mean, certification is very important to us, particularly for our partnership statuses. We have about 400 engineers, and we're sitting around 350 AWS certs.
Wow.
Really trying to drive that up. I think for that, it's also the variety of certs. So I think a lot of our people will have more than one. We've had a lot of people get the kind of Amazon Golden Jacket, and so go up to all certs. There's a continued drive for us. I'd say also diversification. So we've seen a good cert numbers coming through with Microsoft, some of our other key partners like HashiCorp, really being kind of raised up around the organization. It's a really good measure, or it's an easy thing to measure. I think some of the aspects Hannah talked about before about how do we use the engagement survey, how do we kind of measure how people feel about their learning programs is important, but certification is a great kind of really kind of grounded number for us.
Yeah, okay. And so that certification and that focus and that sort of huge number, it's an enormous number, to be fair. But what advantages does sort of the culture of continuous learning, and you're at the pointy end of being one of the most engaged consulting partners in the tech space. What advantages do the certifications and that continuous learning bring to the company, Tim?
Yeah, I think the certification is a great confidence for a customer. So when we have people that need particular skills, we can kind of back it up with the certification to say, look, they've gone through the training, they have certified. For me, certification also shows like a breadth of understanding. So I can go and know Amazon databases, but do I know all the aspects of the data landscape? Do I know how to apply it to different use cases? So it kind of reinforces that there's a breadth of understanding, not just a depth of understanding for our customers and also for our people. It's kind of always like when you do a certification, a lot of the time it's like you didn't know that, or you don't know what you don't know until you kind of run the cert and you get kind of really grounded knowledge that gives that breadth. And the certification is a great reinforcement of that knowledge that you can then tie it back. It then allows us to say, well, let's make sure we give you experience now. So when we look at engagements, how do we make sure, if you've gone and done X certification, how do we make sure you give that experience? So you can kind of reinforce that with on-the-job training. It's good for partner recognition. So a lot of customers, when they talk to us, they'll also want us to have different competencies. A lot of those competencies are grounded in certification numbers as well as use cases. So it reinforces that we can achieve their outcome for them, and we have a great cohort of people that can achieve it for them. And it's not just a single person, it's a group of people. They are pushing the market in the way that they use their technology. So they're the best people to help to solve complex problems or problems that may be unknown, or there's no examples in the industry because it becomes very unique to their space. Yeah.
About hiring, like you're talking very much the customer endpoint and the value to the customer, and also the internal learning culture. But it's a competitive market that you work in, and tech talent is very few far between. So how does that position Versent as the business or as the brand when you're out sort of hiring, or you have open positions. What does this continuous learning culture provide for the business and the brand?
It's a really good question. Like for us, like we're a consulting business, so we're in the kind of people business. So making sure we have a great place where people can come and hone their craft. That is to the continuous learning. It's the engagements that our people will be on. It's really important for us to be able to demonstrate that they're coming, they're going to work on interesting projects, but we're going to reinforce their own learning and their own development, so they change over time. It's incredible to see the personal development. I see a lot of the people come in, or the consultants come in at Versent, where they start from, the breadth of experience, the training paths, and the continuous learning they do. Often I see them, step up, and then how they contribute back to that craft community, whether that's like lightning talks, whether that's showing what they have done on engagement, like publishing a blog, like sharing their thought leadership. You kind of see them start to use that environment, be enabled by it, and then contribute back in that environment. So it has a really great reinforcement cycle.
Yeah, okay. And so from an accountability point of view, do we have Hannah auditing and reviewing your level of certifications and how you're tracking?
I was certified a while back. I have lost all my certification over time. I would love to get some time to go back and do it. I think for me, I spend a lot more time like trying to keep up with how technology is being applied in the market, how are our customers using the technology, where are they struggling about it, and then how do I create an environment for engineers to get the benefits of what we're seeing in the market and how we enable it. If there's a cert for that, I'm all for it.
Well, you're driving that leadership and the principles around continuous learning, and it's I think Hannah mentioned earlier on in our discussion around the importance of the leadership. Look, we're half an hour in. I've probably got one final question for both of you, and I'll be interested in your responses. So if we were to say, Tim, what do you believe are the key components needed for an organization to foster this learning culture? Like, what if there's 3 bullet points that you had to highlight what you think is going to drive a learning culture, what would you say that they are?
Great question again. Like I think it's definitely the org mindset. So a mindset for the organization around continuous learning, knowing that is like levels of experimentation, working out what fits for an organization, and then continually enabling. Definitely not like so prescriptive that it can't be adaptive, but I think it's super important to have the right exec coverage or leadership around continuous learning, but then allow it to adapt and change with how people are using it. I think it's so important to make it relevant to the people. One thing I found really great is like the partnership with Hannah. So I've actually spoken to another organization. They've got a great L&D strategy, very similar model where you've got someone who's probably more of a technical leader or in the technical space or in the space of the business, and then coupled with an L&D partner. Like working together is so important. I think if you have too much, just me, you're not going to get the structured learning approach. And maybe if you have too much of Hannah, you might get a very structured approach, but it might not be as cohesive to the engineers and the teams you're talking about. I'm a big one for lighthearted names. I think Hannah talked about some of the names we talk in our craft program, just making sure that it's fun, it really resonates, it shows a bit of differentiation, and then allows people to go, well, I can think differently about this. I can be a bit explorative, I can be a bit inventive. I see the leadership in the programs doing that. It's encouraging me to kind of jump out and like try something new. So you really want to like make sure that they feel enabled and encouraged to try something different, or get involved and kind of experiment themselves in their day-to-day and make time to try something new.
Yeah, okay. So I'm hearing sort of the executive, sort of senior, sort of business directive, having the resources and the team, the yin and the yang, and then also making it fun, which I think is, life's very short and stressful, so we like to make fun and have fun while we do it. Hannah, is there any other components there from your side of things that you would encourage people to sort of embrace for fostering that learning culture?
Yeah, and I think probably to the tune of what I've said a lot so far in this webinar is that it's probably going to depend based on your organization as well. So I think it's important to get really close to and understand, what do your people want? What are they motivated by? Why do they learn? Why do they want to learn? I think for us and the people at Versent, we have brilliant minds here, and people want to learn from each other and hear from each other as well. And so sometimes we're not necessarily front and center in a learning program or a learning culture. It's actually better to be behind the scenes, help people share their learning or try something new, run a new program. So I think understanding what makes your employees tick is important. Keeping it fun, like Tim said, I think is great. It makes it easy to talk about. It makes it fun for people to get involved. I think another thing for people to keep in mind if you're wanting to foster a really strong learning culture is make it easy to participate. So with the craft programs, some of them can be quite intensive. Take a dev jam, for example. You're spending time, you're developing a solution, you're pitching it, you're refining it. That requires time. But if you have these kind of layers to learning experiences where, you know what, I might not necessarily have time to join a dev jam team, but I'm going to come along to a session and I'm going to learn a little bit about it. And it's going to be very easy for me to opt in and do that. I think that goes a really long way as well. You don't have to go super all in and expect everyone to come to every single session and get involved in every single topic. If you create layers and make it easy for people to just, you know, poke their head around and say, oh, what's going on over there? Okay, cool. I picked up something new. That goes a really long way as well. So yeah, and I think continuing to listen and be curious, like Tim said, we take on a lot of feedback and we adapt. We're not wedded to things and dig our heels in unnecessarily. Like, continue to listen, continue to be curious, think about what else is out there, challenge yourself to think about, how can I make this better next time, or what do my people want? And that goes a long way too, because then people are empowered and want to contribute and want to tell you their thoughts too. So yeah, that's what I'd say. Those would be my tips.
So go on, Tim.
So I was going to say, like, we did this kind of experiment around use of badges for, you know, how you've achieved something. We're going to create a badge, and we had a graphic designer kind of design the badges for us, and they're kind of really fun. And then we got some tool that allows us to publish them, not that much cost. And then we went ahead and said, like, what would people like as a prize? Because we're running like a competition, and we said, well, what would the prize be? And everyone's like, I really want a badge. And I was just like blown away that I don't say like gamification, but like the recognition and like a badge that was really fun. People really wanted that, and I don't think I really understood that actually meant something. So we've continued
Is it
to
like a wearable badge?
No, it was like a
digital
badge, but it was, you know, we made it like as recognition, and we designed it with a graphic designer. We put time into it, and then it's very easy to share them on LinkedIn. And I'm always astounded, like, of the shares that I get of people achieving like certain kind of milestones or contributing to some aspect of Versent life and getting a badge. It was just like a little kind of antidote where I didn't expect that it would be so high impact. And I always hear people going, "Oh, we're going to get a badge for this." I'm like, "Oh, it's great!" And I love creating the badges, and we love, you know, talking about how we're going to do it. So it's fun for us, and it's really fun and engaging. But if we hadn't experimented with it, I would have just like not thought it was going to be a thing.
And that goes back to your statement that you made before about listening to your people and getting feedback, which is interesting. Who would have thought a digital badge was going to have, you know, so much impact? That's great. Okay, so
I have to make it physical at some point. I'd like to.
Oh, look out!
Put it on the hoodies.
I'm pleased to hear that you said that you had a graphic designer come on board to design it, Tim. That's good to hear. Look, before we open for questions from some of our attendees today, do you guys have any question for me? Like, is there any question that you want to ask me? I've obviously been doing all the questioning here about your learning culture, and obviously we're a training business. Is there any questions that come to mind that you want me to sort of consider?
I'd love to know how you see training change. Like we see how it changes for our organization, and we have a very technical based like team. Like, how do you see training develop it wider in the industry? How do you see other organizations approaching that kind of continuous learning. I'd love to kind of maybe just take it out of you and see how you see the continuous learning and the industry kind of moving over time.
Good question. I think Hannah had touched on this before. COVID shook things up. We were previously a in-person training business, and COVID hit, and that wasn't possible. But the change to going live virtual with our instructors and live and it's vendor centric, right? So all of the curriculum and the content is driven by the vendor. But it opened an opportunity for us to have greater reach. So people could dial in from anywhere around region. So there wasn't that sort of, I suppose, accessible point. So it's more accessible. We are seeing a big shift around customers asking for a blended learning solution. We obviously represent AWS, and they have a very solid, strong skill builder platform, which we can resell. So we're still finding that demand for IoT. On the odd occasion, we're getting organizations to say, we want to do an in-person session. We've got 15 cohort of people. Can you come on site to our organization and deliver that training? So we can do that. But the big thing is the blended learning. So the digital subscriptions is one thing, and the ask around that bite-sized content that sort of encourages that self-paced learning. But on the flip side to that, what we're finding as well is that just subscribing to a self-paced platform doesn't guarantee engagement, doesn't guarantee that you're going to leverage the costs that's associated to those subscriptions. You really need to have someone like an L&D manager or an administrator that is checking in, reporting, looking at learning pathways, seeing completion rates, seeing the level of engagement for the team to maximize their investment there. IoT is still really, really strong for us. The value of putting your hand up, asking a question with the trainer, live engagement with the trainer, the extension of the lab environment. So all of our programs now, you've got those sandbox environments, the AWS Builder Labs. On completion of the program, we communicate out to our students that they have access for 30 days from the end of the training session. So that enables people to go back and test their skill set in that sandbox environment that they may not necessarily have entirely covered off during the 3-day program. We're also finding the ask for different delivery concepts. So we've started trialing 6 sessions with 4 hours per session. So it's sort of like 6 consecutive days over a 4-hour window. Strangely enough, the current pilot that we're doing is out of hours. So organizations are investing sort of 5:30 to 9:30, which I don't think will be for everyone. But there is a desire to have a look at different timings. We have also trialed, we call it a month of Mondays, but it's like 3 consecutive Mondays that deliver a 3-day architecting program, so that each week the attendees will only be out of the business for 1 day in the week. So it helps them manage their workloads of projects and customer engagements a little bit better. So it is evolving. We're still very passionate about what we do. One of my missions is enabling people to reach their true potential. So I'm sitting here running the business and owning the business that allows me to do that. So yeah, that's probably my feedback from that question. Okay, now that I'm off the radar with the questions, what we'd like to do is we've got an additional sort of 10 to 15 minutes left, that we might put it out to our attendees to see if there's any specific questions that we would like to ask Tim or Hannah. I'm just having a look here. Okay, it looks like there's a question here coming from, and I might address this to Hannah. Does each employee get a custom learning plan, or do you use learning plan templates for certain roles or team learning plans and outcomes?
Yeah, really good question. I think depending on your organization size, you might be able to have custom per person learning plans. At our size, it's not manageable with our our team size and things like that. So I think one thing that we found valuable is looking at things like capability frameworks and skills taxonomies and that kind of thing, and then mapping it to a role and core roles. So that might be, a data engineer, it might be cloud engineers. Taking the time to sort of do that work, while it's a bit of grunt work up front, is really useful, because then you can get an outline or a plan for a role. Obviously, everyone's learning needs are going to be different as well, but you can create the basis of it and give guidance around the core capabilities and skills someone should be looking at, but then also encourage them to be like, this is what this looks like based off a piece of paper. You are far more dynamic than that. Help us customize that to your skills and your specific learning needs too. And here's, a pathway on consulting skills. If that's an area for you that we haven't captured in this plan, add it in and customize it to you. So I think working off role-based, if you've got the bandwidth in a team to be able to do that, is great. You give people a basis, but also really empowering individuals to take that and then customize it and go from there. We never want to be too prescriptive.
Yeah, okay. I assume also that there is a component of the organization and the making sure that it's aligned to their role or aligned to a specific project that they may well be working on.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't do these things and develop role plans and training plans in isolation. You need to be really close to the people who understand that aspect of the business or that project, and work together to pull that together and contextualize it.
Yeah, okay. I've got a question here from one of our listeners. How do you ensure or encourage consultants make time for learning fully utilised?
Tim, do you want to do that one, or I can jump in?
Is that about the consultants when they're fully utilised or utilising the full time?
I'm reading into this as around managing, I suppose, your billable hours of consultants. Like, how do you ensure you're encouraging consultants that they're still keeping up that continuous learning while also juggling, let's call it, their day job?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. It comes actually up a lot for us. As a business, we budget in learning time, so we don't ever budget someone's going to be 100% utilized. It's really important for us to make time for people leadership, back to base activities, team meetings. Part of that is an aspect for learning and development that's allocated to them. Like it's over a year. What we then encourage the people to do is work with their people leaders and their project managers to schedule in the time. I think it's really important. Like if people know it's scheduled in, it's much easier to take advantage of it. That helps to ensure that they have booked in time and they know how much time that they can manage, and then kind of break it up across the year. As a consulting company, that is a piece for us. We do focus a lot as a company around outcome-based work. So for us, it's about how do we achieve the outcome with a customer that might be under a fixed price construct. So we do find projects kind of go up and down, and then using the time when they're on the bench to then focus on learning. We've spent probably the last year or so, actually, how do we be more active about managing bench time? So rather than, hey, you're on the bench, go and craft your own journey. For us, it's more about, okay, now you're on the bench, we're going to give you a structured engagement to that. Part of that is, hey, you might want to go and do your L&D at this time or book it in because it's coming up. Other parts of that is, you can contribute to internal projects, you can contribute to the craft activities. So we're getting much better at helping to structure these in so people have it baked in, it's available, it's known. As I kind of said before, it's really important for us to make sure people are having continuous learning, and part of that is making and building the time in and enabling people to have those conversations with the people leaders, and the people leaders saying, look, this is part of the organization. It's a priority. It's not something that we'll just do later.
Yeah, okay. And I suppose further to that, Tim, you previously had mentioned around listening to your people and, having your line managers or mentors. Would it be fair to say that you must encourage people to speak up, put their hand up and say, look, you know, we have this continuous learning culture, but I'm not finding time in my schedule because of X, Y, Z. How do we address that issue? Is that something that you would encourage, I suppose, managers to encourage their people to be following?
Yeah, I think it's a really good conversation because we'll create an environment for continuous learning, but then it is up to the learner to be able to choose what path is correct for them, but also be able to have a conversation with their line manager or their people leader or their project manager to say, like, I need this time to research this, I need this time to develop that. So it's kind of like a two-way conversation. Like, we create the environment and then we encourage our people to then have the conversations and take a level of like responsibility for their learning outcomes and goals. It does need to be both ways as part of that conversation.
And I suppose also you're enabling these key skills, right? Which is going to make them more efficient, more engaged in delivering the better outcome for the customer. So to some respects, I think using time as a barrier to entry can be sometimes a double-edged sword, because if the skills and capabilities are lacking, how efficient are the projects being worked on? How efficient is the outcome? You know, is it the best solution for the customer to be driven? I've got another question here, which is, what are the top 3 consulting skills in your opinion?
Oh, maybe this one's a good one for Hannah.
It'd be interesting to contrast like what we think, Tim. There's a couple that come to mind. I think being able to storytell is really important, and whether that's storytelling with technical information, data, but being able to speak to the customer's language in a way that is meaningful, I think is a really underrated skill. And it kind of gets wrapped up in kind of, oh, they need to be able to present well. If you dig into that, I actually think storytelling is quite important there. Problem solving and critical thinking kind of go hand in hand, but like thinking through different problems, different approaches, and how you might address something, and almost active listening and kind of coaching skills as well. You'll see I tend to lean more to the people, and I call them soft skills. There's nothing soft about them. But active listening and coaching and those kinds of like being able to pull out and tease out information to get a really clear picture would be my kind of top 3. What about you, Tim?
So similar. I think it's interesting that I think those kind of human or soft skills are so important for consulting. I was also thinking a lot around the active listening, like as a consultant, we want to go in with depth of knowledge around the domain that we specialize in. So let's say we're going in as an Amazon consultant. Consultants need to know depth about what they're talking about. We need to be able to ground the conversation to give the customers the right path forward. But you can have depth, but if you can't listen actively to the customer, understand their environment, their constraints, how they operate, or if you can't tell a story or work through a coaching style conversation to help them understand what's the best path forward, it's very hard to get the right solution or kind of match it. So I would say it's really important to have depth in the domain that you're talking about. Otherwise, you can't consult or give the right advice, but you need to have those other skills around it to be able to work with the customer and adapt that into their environment.
So when you talk about their environment, Tim, is that also like problem identification? You know, what problem we're trying to solve?
I think what problem are we solving, the right problem? Often like what industries, like what regulatory requirements, what process,
Oh,
what processes they need, because
sounds like the curtain's coming down on our conversation.
I'm gone. I mean, the technology is the same, but the adapting it, like a customer is using an Amazon service, it will have very different requirements, different approaches to a customer in a different industry or of a different size. Like an enterprise customer will use it very differently to SMB customer.
Okay. I've got one final question here. If we're talking about the senior executive buy-in, I believe this conversation, well, I don't know. How do you quantify or measure having a learning and development culture? So
yeah, that's a tricky one.
I'm assuming that is how you report up to management about disinvestment of the culture, and these are the outcomes. Like, I'm assuming that's what the question means.
Yeah, and it's hard to put a figure or a quantity on culture, right? Because so much of it is intangible, and it's a feeling and it's an experience and that kind of thing. I think when it comes to executive buy-in, you need to know the metrics that matter to your execs, and the things that they care about. So they're really driven by employee engagement, for example, or if they're really driven by, retention numbers or things like that, it's pulling out all those kinds of metrics that matter and finding the links between learning programs and learning experiences and pulling that all together to paint a picture. There's no one single metric that I've found, and if someone knows one, please let me know, but that indicates a learning culture. It's a whole host of things, and so you really need to dig into the data, understand what your execs are driven by. Some are going to be driven by a dollar figure. And so if you can say, hey, well, by building this capability internally, instead of going out and hiring it, we've saved X amount. That contributes to the buy-in. By being able to demonstrate that, in our engagement survey, like our learning experience, our learning ecosystem is rated super high, and how that then links into retention, that's also really valuable too. So for me, there's no one perfect metric when it comes to learning. It's a whole tapestry of things, but it's being able to maybe identify what the different levers are that you can pull within an executive team and what they care about,
Yep.
and bringing that all together in a story to sort of build your case there.
Yeah, okay. I like that. It's almost a nice way to end, actually. So we are now at just on 12 o'clock. Look, I would just like to say thank you, Tim and Hannah. I really appreciate your insights. We love the partnership that we have with you. It's really nice to see this continuous learning driving from the executive level. For anyone that's listening, that's interested in wanting to learn a little bit more about how Bespoke can support you on your individual or organization journey, feel free to reach out. I might put in the chat window, if I could ask Fiona to send a link in the chat window with probably my email address, and also just our website, which we can start a conversation. Let's start a conversation about how we build that learning culture. Tim and Hannah, it's great to talk to you as always. Really appreciate your time, and I wish you well for the rest of the week.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
Thanks
Trent.
so
That
much.
was fun.
Okay,
Bye.
guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.